Greetings everyone, Cardinal Matthew Stater here with the Ecumenical Order of Christ. Now, apologies to those who may have been waiting for this video. It has been close to 6 weeks since I said I would be back next week. I've been unwell, but I'm back now to finish off the readings that I began. Now, where we last left off, I was speaking about the coming Kingdom of Christ, which would have a population limit of 500 million, give or take. Now, the reason for that is essentially to keep the population in balance with nature. That is the prime motivation for that. Now, that number is not new. It has been on public display on the Georgia Guidestones, as I mentioned at the end of July, in many different languages. Now, there is a list of 10 commandments on the Georgia Guidestones, and they are detailed as follows. Now, first of all, as we already mentioned, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Second, guide reproduction wisely, generally improving the fitness and diversity of the population. Now 3, unite humanity with a new living language, or a living new language rather. Number 4, to rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. That is, not to let emotion rule the day. For logic to be the underlying foundation behind everything. Number 5 is to protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Now, of course, a popular personal saying of my own is, we do not have justice systems in the world as it is today. We have legal systems. The courts do not exist, the police do not exist to serve justice. They exist to enforce laws, and that is the extent of it. Their goal is not to serve justice. It has not been for a long time. Number 6, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Now, again, most of these are sounding very logical so far, aren't they? Number 7, avoiding petty laws and useless officials. Now, again, for what it's worth, my own personal view on this. In Australia, we have a federal government. Each of our states has a state government, and then you have local governments. And from my own perspective, there is not a single thing that the state governments do that could not be done more effectively by either the local governments or the federal government. Quite often there are issues that the state governments are independently trying to deal with in a multitude of different ways, when it's plainly obvious that it should be something that falls under the umbrella of the federal government to apply the same standard to the whole nation. But this is the world we live in. Number 8, a balance of personal rights with social duties. And again, with a little bit of thought, that should be self-explanatory and should make a lot of sense. Number 9, to prize truth, beauty and love, seeking harmony with the infinite. And finally, number 10, be not a cancer upon the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Again, it comes back to the first one. Perpetual balance with nature. Now, it should be plainly obvious to everyone that the current materialistic way that humanity lives, it is not sustainable. Now, there are a multitude of different factors that contribute to that, and that will contribute to changing that to a more balanced way of living. It's not just about population control. It's about better methods of production, eliminating the pattern of manufacturing that deliberately engineers products to break and break down. Now, anyone over the age of 40 should know that cars, as an example, that were built anywhere up until probably the early 1980s would run forever with very little maintenance. And yet it seems like modern cars that are built in the last 30 years, something else is breaking down every month. Now, would it not make sense that with advancing technology, the cars should be requiring even less maintenance than they did 40 years ago? That's just one example. If you want a more detailed look at that concept, you should be able to find the Zeitgeist documentaries or interviews with Peter Joseph on YouTube, who talks about, in some segments he talks about things called planned obsolescence and intrinsic obsolescence. It's that exact concept of the products wearing out, breaking down, and things that are being made to deliberately wear out and break down. Two different sides of the same coin. But I will just get back to the population reduction thing briefly. Setting aside the fact that many people on earth have proven that they are not worthy of Christ Rael's new kingdom, we need to look at the facts of overpopulation. Now, this is a quote from Mathis Wackernagle, president of the Global Footprint Network. While ever greater food production, mineral extraction, forest clearance and fossil fuel burning bring short-term and unequally distributed lifestyle gains, the long-term consequences are increasingly apparent in terms of soil erosion, water shortages and climate disruption. Now, of course, there is also Matthew 6:33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things shall be added to you. Well, that brings us to the end of those 3 segments that I've covered, that are, of course, in the Return of Christ book, spanned chapter 65 and 64 and 65 from pages 104 to 107. For next week's reading, I'll choose a different section of the book, and we'll go from there. But until then, always try to learn something new, always try to do something to help someone else, and of course, above all, love God and love each other. God bless.